So yeah, estate planning is kind of a natural outgrowth of real estate because a lot of times people move here from other states and they have questions, do I need to update my will? Do I need to do these sorts of things? What does it mean to be in a different state?
Can we talk a little bit about that, about South Carolina requiring an attorney? Why wouldn't people just say, hey, I'll just use an attorney versus a real estate agent?
To break it down, yes, we are an attorney state. It's required by the law that an attorney is present at closing and conducts the closing, holds the funds, and oversees the entire transaction. At the actual closing table, when you're signing the documents, an attorney needs to be present.
Welcome to Real Talk Hilton Head with David and Dale Cross, the real estate lifestyle podcast of Coastal Carolina.
Join us as we share stories from our community, insight into the local lifestyle, and the real scoop on real estate.
From market trends to home design, we dive deep into what it means to live and thrive here.
Discover the state of mind and philosophy of the Low Country that enriches life through personal growth, health and wellness, and human connection.
Whether you're a local or thinking of becoming one, we're here to guide you through the ins and outs of living this coastal escape.
Tune in, relax, and enjoy the conversation with Real Talk Hilton Head,
the podcast of Coastal Carolina.
Welcome to Real Talk Hilton Head. Today we're diving into the unique role of attorneys in South Carolina real estate.
We'll break down why an attorney must handle every closing here in the state of South Carolina and how they work alongside us, your realtor, and why having a local estate planner is crucial, especially if you're relocating. It's critical for protecting your property and your legacy.
Well, let's get started.
Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us, you guys. We're excited to have you.
Thanks for asking us to be here.
Yeah.
I think we're both super thrilled.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, the intro says, we're here to talk about all things real estate attorney related to real estate transaction. But before we go there, let's talk about you two and get a little bit of background. First of all, are you both attorneys?
Yes.
Okay.
Licensed in the state of South Carolina?
So I'm only licensed in New York and South Carolina, but you have a lot more.
I am licensed in New York, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia.
Wow.
Really?
Wow, so double.
What's that? Yeah.
Why is that?
Different basically clients who said, hey, it'd be great if you could do something in, say, North Carolina. So I got licensed there. Same thing with Georgia. New York was just kind of, I didn't know where to take the bar after law school. You guys know my wife. She's from Norway. And I knew I was moving to Norway. So I was like, which bar might be relevant in Norway? And the answer is none of them.
Okay.
But New York is slightly more relevant than others. So
It's an international city, so
that was kind of the idea.
yeah.
Education to your clients.
I got it.
I tried.
Well, Tom, why don't we start with you? What's your background? Who are you? Where'd you come from? How'd you get here?
Well, I am from Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. So
You were born here?
I was not born here, but I moved here before first grade. So my mom got a job. She actually was president of the Technical College of the Low Country, and that's how our family ended up here. Moved here before first grade. I went to grades 1 through 12 at Hilton Head Prep. So I have been, in and around Hilton Head for a long, long time. After high school, though, moved away and came back in 2019. So
how long were you gone?
20 years.
Okay. Wow. So when you left, was the intention like, oh, you know what? I can't wait to get off that little island and get somewhere meaningful or whatever it is. And then, I would love to know that journey.
There's a little bit of that. I mean, if you grew up here, particularly then, because it was a lot smaller.
Yeah.
There was Hilton Head. There was virtually nothing in Bluffton at the time.
Wow.
And, it was like, I want to go off to college, go to a city, like get a professional job, do all that sort of stuff. And over time, you kind of realize, you know what? It wasn't that bad where I grew up. And I complained that there wasn't that much to do, but in actuality, there was quite a bit to do that was not only kind of fun for teenagers, but also free. Like you can go to the beach, you can go bike riding, you can do all this sort of stuff. And then everywhere else I lived, I just didn't like it as much.
Okay.
So eventually we decided to move back.
That's great. So now obviously you're married.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Hannah. So Hannah, had she ever been here before?
She hadn't lived here, but she'd been here a bunch of times
Okay.
because she was dating me. So my parents have lived in the same house since 1987.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up in Moss Creek. They still live in Moss Creek, same street. So yeah, she'd been basically coming back every year or every other year,
Yeah.
depending the entire time.
Now, you and Hannah met in college. Well, you're both attorneys?
We met in law school.
Law school.
So when I was in law school, she was actually studying to get a master's degree in American law because her main law degree is from the University of Oslo. So yeah, she got a supplementary degree here,
Okay.
and kind of the rest is history.
Wow. So what was the decision to move back? Just like, hey, we want to go back because your parents were here. We want to go back because of the lifestyle.
It was a little bit of both because we had at the time a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and we were living in Manhattan, and Manhattan is very expensive. And a lot of the stuff that is great about Manhattan, you don't experience as much with like a 2-year-old. So for instance, you're not going to a lot of ballets and symphonies and art museums with a 2-year-old. You're going to a lot of playgrounds.
Yes.
And we really wanted just a little bit more help with kids. And so we thought, well, maybe we'll go somewhere closer to either her home or my home. And we liked here. We lived in Oslo before, so we figured we'd give here a shot.
Yeah.
And that was 5 years ago. So.
Wow. That's great. Awesome.
One little known fact too, Hannah and I are very good friends, and we're very competitive on the tennis court. She's a great tennis player.
You are as well.
Yeah.
You're being modest, but you guys are both two of the better tennis players in the area.
We have a lot of fun, Hannah and I.
We're going to save that for the tennis podcast.
All right, we'll bring her on.
No, I'm just kidding.
I'm sure she could talk about tennis all day.
We're going to have a tennis podcast.
Because she's doing a ton of pickleball.
Any sport you hit with the ball, she's happy.
That's great.
That's awesome. So then tell us a little bit about law school and your degrees.
Okay, sure. I went to undergrad at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I majored in history. I have a minor in computer science. So if you need anything programmed,
I didn't know that.
ask somebody else. I don't want to do it. No, don't ask me.
Welcome to Real Talk.
Yeah.
This is what comes out.
You learned something, right? Also went back to Wake for law school. Took 2 years off in between, but yeah, I've spent 7 years of my life in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So I don't even have a backup sports team to root for. So if Wake is not doing well, I'm just sad, basically.
Yeah. Well,
Nation will take you on.
I appreciate that.
I was just,
I'll join, but I appreciate the offer.
come on, man.
Fine.
So, Natalia, tell us about you and your background and kind of where you come from. How did you end up here?
Well, I was born and raised in Brooklyn. My parents are Polish immigrants, so my first language is actually Polish, and I'm just looking for more Polish clients in this area.
Are there a lot?
They're very small community. We have a Facebook group. There's about 25 of us.
That's great.
Every single time we have a client with a Polish last name, she will announce to the entire office, they're Polish.
So if you remember my big fat Greek wedding, they're like, the root of this word is Greek. So that's me with Polish last names. So I look at people, I'm like, that's a Polish last name. And they're like, oh yeah, it is. How'd you know? And I'm like, I know. And they pronounce it. I'm like, that's actually not how you pronounce it. I can teach you. But anyway, so I grew up speaking Polish. Grew up in Brooklyn, went to Polish Saturday school. It's like a huge part of my identity. And then I went to law school up in upstate New York, and I majored in criminal justice and sociology, and then I did like a 3+3 program. So I did college in 3 years and then law school in 3 years. So I was a barred attorney by the time I was 24.
Wow, congratulations.
So you're one of those smart attorneys then.
So I like kind of went through all of it like really quick. So I was practicing my time I was 24. And given my background, I always loved, there was an immigration clinic at my law school, so I always did immigration work. And I actually did a semester at Yale Law doing the immigration clinic there as well, which was really great and an amazing experience. So I was really committed to doing immigration work anywhere but New York City. So I applied all over the country, California, Texas. Then I accidentally applied to a job in Bluffton, South Carolina.
And accidentally?
Totally. I just attached all the attachments, cover letter, resume. I had like 7 attachments. And then I saw Bluffton, South Carolina. I'm like, what is that?
And where is that?
And I was like, you know what? I have all the attachments. Let me just send it in. And then I came for an interview in Charleston. And they asked me, do you want to do Charleston or Bluffton? And I was like, I want to do Bluffton. Like Charleston's another city. Like
You'd never been here though?
No, completely no. I just looked at
what made you choose that?
So I just researched kind of, and I saw Bluffton was close to Hilton Head, close to the beach. It was in a city. Because growing up in Brooklyn, my commute to my high school, I took 3 subways one way. So my morning commute to high school was an hour and 10 minutes.
Wow.
Gosh.
And it's just going from Brooklyn to, I was across the street from the stock exchange in downtown Manhattan.
Wow.
So anyway, so I was like, I don't want to commute. If there's a parking lot or a driveway, like that was the American dream to me, was that
The mailbox.
the mailbox. So when I first bought my first house, actually, I thought that was like a thing in movies, the little red tab on the mailbox. Yeah, I was like, oh, I thought that was like a movie thing. And the sprinklers coming out of the ground of the house. I was like, I didn't know that was like real.
Oh my goodness.
What I love is I can attest to that being from Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
When I first arrived and I saw the yellow school bus, I really thought that was just a movie.
Yeah, exactly.
The yellow school bus.
Yeah,
And they have little signs that go.
exactly. Just the fact that you can go to a grocery store and there's a parking spot for you is just ultimate luxury for me being from New York City.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so I came down here. I did immigration defense for a couple of years, probably like 4. So I traveled all over the country because it was federal law.
Okay.
Oh,
The
wow.
different immigration detention centers. And then ultimately I did divorce law for it just feels like
Wow.
I've been practicing for 7 or 8 years almost.
Yeah.
So then I did divorce litigation, and then ultimately I decided I want to be happy. So I did real estate.
I mean, even just on the real estate side of thing, anytime we have a divorce situation, those are
Yeah,
very challenging
I
deals.
love those.
Ew.
I do, because I feel like I have so much experience in like being able to read those settlement statements, know where they are in the process.
That's a good point.
I think we had one together.
We did.
Which obviously we can't talk too much about,
Right.
but I remember
We did.
Dale and I spent time on the phone discussing it,
Yeah.
because I knew exactly where they were in the process and what part of that agreement is law yet, or a judge signed an order that is a law, where a lot of different attorneys or experienced people wouldn't exactly know kind of where it fits into. How do I follow this judge's order? Is this an order? Is this a temporary order? Is this a permanent order?
Wow.
And that was so helpful in our transaction, having that extra.
That's almost a whole nother podcast. I mean, because we've come across that quite a bit, and that's to navigate that with real property involved
Mhm.
Yeah.
is a whole another
Well, maybe
ballgame.
we can add that in our questions.
Yeah, that's true.
But I guess I just completely veered off on my story.
That's okay. So now tie it back in. So, you did the immigration law, you did the divorce law. How do you go from that to real estate and real property? And
Yeah.
To be happy.
Those litigation, while I did that for so many years, being before judges and in courts and other attorneys and prosecutors, federal prosecutors for the immigration things as well, that was all such great experience. And I feel like it comes in handy every day.
Yeah.
However, it was really tough and challenging in terms of having like a home life or a balance. I was getting up at 3 a.m. and flying to Atlanta to a court. Doing a trial and then flying back and going back in the office. It was
Yeah.
16, 17-hour days.
yeah.
I remember your joke that the flight attendants on that flight
Yeah,
knew you
Yeah.
because that's how
Wow.
often you were on that
So
flight.
I was so often on that 5 a.m. flight to Atlanta that I would lay down across the seats and they would buckle my legs and my chest
Aw.
in that I could nap during takeoff because it's such a short flight.
Yeah.
So anyway, long story short, I just wanted to change.
Yeah.
And I think real estate is a great change. Ultimately, all the parties on a real estate transaction are working toward the same goal, right? The agents want it to close, the lender wants it to close, the client wants it to close, the seller wants it to close, the attorney wants it to close, the title insurance company, the insurance guy, everyone is working toward one goal.
Yeah.
And that's obviously not the case in litigation.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own goal.
Yeah.
So I think that's why real estate's such a unique area of what we do every day, all of us, is because we're all working toward one common goal.
Oh, that's great.
That's a great point.
That is a good point.
Yeah.
Now, just for the record, for anybody listening or watching, you both work for the same law firm.
Oh, we missed that part.
We both work for Butler College.
Now, did you guys come at the same time? Were you part of it first?
I came first, yeah.
Okay,
And
I
then
got
you
it.
joined what? Half a year later?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Butler College, their scope, what's their presence, what are your roles within the firm and things like that. If you can break that down a little bit.
I mean,
I can do it.
all right, go for it.
Butler and College was started by Ryan Butler and Andrew College. They started the firm probably about 10 years ago. Now we have eight different office locations going up and down the coast, so stretching from Calabash down to us in Bluffton, and in between we of course have Myrtle Beach, Wando, Mount Pleasant, Moncks Corner, Somerville. We have a bunch of office locations, probably around 40 employees total, several attorneys. I can't count.
12-ish,
12 attorneys.
give or
Okay.
take.
Okay.
Yeah, so huge presence up and down the coast. And of course, we want to keep growing and keep growing our practice. Our huge thing is just being big on customer service and making sure people are getting the best experience possible. Because even though we're all still working toward one goal, it is a stressful process for buyers.
It is.
There's, a lot of one chapter of their lives is ending and another one's kind of beginning. So we're kind of those people walking them through that transition.
Mm-hmm.
So we're really big on customer service, making sure our clients feel like they can come to us with any questions and we'll guide them through the process. 90, I would say 95% of the practice is real estate and doing these real estate transactions. And then we have the estate planning division, which I guess I can pass off to Tom.
Yeah, so I think if you were looking at the attorneys, all of them except two pretty much do real estate.
Okay.
Like all offices or just the Bluffton?
All offices.
All
Okay.
offices. Okay.
And then two of us primarily do estate planning.
Got
So
it.
I'm one of the two based in Bluffton. The other one is in Charleston. So yeah, estate planning is kind of a natural outgrowth of
course.
real estate because a lot of times people move here from other states
Yeah.
and they have questions. Do I need to update my will? Do I need to do these sorts of things? What does it mean to be in a different state? And so it's just kind of a natural supplementary practice area for a firm that started out as a real estate firm.
Yeah.
I guess is the best way to put it. So,
That's good. What I love about it though is that's your focus, right? That's your niche, and you can do it, and you can do it well. Do it at a high level. Getting back into the client side of things, for one, how many of your clients are coming from out of town? Because obviously Hilton Head, we mainly retirees and second homes, investment properties. I mean, obviously there's full-time residents, but the folks coming, are usually coming from somewhere else. How much of that business is, would you say, do you even have the number?
out of state?
Yeah, that people are relocating.
I'm surprised when I see a
99?
Yeah, I would. The best way to
Wow.
describe it is I'm surprised when I see a South Carolina license when I open the file.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm like,
So
oh.
obviously a real-
And then when I go in there, the first question I ask is, so where are you actually from?
Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe one time, two times in the last 2 years, someone said, no, I'm from here. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay.
Because mostly New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, I think Ohio. They've come down, they've gotten a taste, and that taste just wasn't enough, and they just want to come down. And my sister's moving here now, and my daughter's moving here, and this cousin that visited once wants to move here. And I'm like, that's how I think all of us ended up here.
Yeah, that's right. Except for Tom.
I will say, if you looked at our Myrtle Beach office, it's probably similar to here.
Okay.
If you looked at the Charleston area offices, you'd probably see a little higher percentage of just resale within the Charleston market.
Okay.
Because it's a bigger city, bigger metro market where people are moving, changing from a starter home to we've got a family, that type of thing. But yeah, here in Myrtle Beach, I think it's just a lot of people moving in who have been dreaming of retiring and they finally made it, and they're happy to be here.
But that's another thing too with real estate is I was thinking about this last night. You see people in all different areas of life or stages of life. You have the retired couple. I had a couple closings this week where it's newlyweds yesterday. They got married 2-3 weeks ago. You see people who come in couples that they're pregnant and they're expecting, it'll be their first family home.
Yeah.
Sometimes see the people that did just go through a divorce, but they moved down here to be closer to family and they're getting their home on their own.
Yeah.
So you deal with people in all stages of life, which is also a super interesting part of real estate.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think the market is changing since 2020. There's a lot more people that are staying permanently here. So I'm sure you're going to start seeing those resales, the move up buyers, more often.
Definitely.
Yeah, I definitely think that, post-COVID changed a lot of things. The remote, once people got the taste of remote, I've been reading articles about companies wanting to try to bring people back, but people are kind of like, no, I'm not doing it. I like this remote thing. And so I think we're going to see a shift in who actually is moving here, and especially as Ridgeland and Hardyville. We got 19, 20,000 houses slated to come in out there, and I think that's going to be more of those families and people, young professionals. The key will be the jobs. It's always the jobs, but as long as remote works there.
That's what I was going to say. Is the only thing this region has always kind of not had is a big anchor employer on this side of the Savannah River.
That's right.
So,
with the growth in Hardyville and Ridgeland, you can live on this side, shoot down, 'cause it's not that far.
But I see it now too, like as a young professional. So again, like young couple, there's a vet clinic that opened.
Yeah.
For a couple of closings for some of the veterinarians that were coming down, or young doctors or young nurses.
Yeah.
Of course, there's also a little bit of a niche for the Marine base that's nearby as well. So we have some closings for Beaufort, kind of that area as well. But people come down, they decide they're going to, once they're 3 years or however many years they're in or up, they want to stay here.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother area that's bringing more people down, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I heard somebody say what Bluffton was 20, because to your point, like Bluffton, it was probably 25 years ago, really. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Buckwalter Parkway didn't exist. Bluffton Parkway didn't exist.
Bridge.
78 was a 2-lane road.
That's all in the last 25 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that is wild to think. And I've heard somebody said, we're going to look back and we're going to be like, Ridgeland, is where Bluffton is now is where Ridgeland and Hardyville will be.
I keep telling my husband we need to buy something out there.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
Well, we're talking about all the people relocating here. Would you say they're coming from different states, right? South Carolina, real estate requires that you use an attorney. Can we talk a little bit about that? About South Carolina requiring an attorney? Why wouldn't people just say, "Hey, I'll just use an attorney" versus a real estate agent in this area?
Yeah, let's break it because we come from a title state.
Yeah,
we use the title company. You never talk to an attorney. So let's break that down, because that's always a question when we say to people, "Hey, you have to pick an attorney."
So the obvious answer is our legislature, in requiring an attorney to do the closing, did a good job protecting attorney. No, I'm only partly
you can be happy with that. Yeah.
But, yeah. Good job, folks.
Yeah.
It helps that a lot of them are also attorneys and the legislature. But no, it's all right.
It's not a conspiracy show here. Okay.
All right.
To break it down, yes, we are an attorney state. It's required by the law that an attorney is present at closing and conducts the closing, holds the funds, and oversees the entire transaction. At the actual closing table, when you're signing the documents, an attorney needs to be present.
Now, that's for every so if Hunter and I say, "Hey, I'm going to sell my house. I'm going to buy your house. I got cash," we can't just do that ourselves in South Carolina?
No. Well, you want an attorney to draft the deed. I mean, you can draft your own deed and then kind of hope for the best.
Okay.
But
it's a really bad idea to try. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
yeah.
Well, let's break that down then too, because so not only do we have to do it, but explain all the steps and nuances why and why it's important.
So basically, I guess I can explain how we kind of explain that a file opens in our office and it goes through a conveyor belt, right? So when the file first opens, the way that we get the file is a real estate agent will send us the executed contract. In South Carolina, most times, or 99% of the time, the real estate agents are doing the contract, negotiating the contract, doing all of that work, showing the property. Attorneys do not do any of that. That's why you really want your real estate agent, and you want a good real estate agent, because they'll get you through that whole beginning process.
Sorry, you said good real estate agent. I just light up.
Do you guys know any?
Yeah.
The David Dale team. Sorry.
You want David, Cross, and Dale to get you through that whole beginning process. So the attorney is not included in that part at all. I am not going out and shopping homes or giving advice on price or market analyses, anything like that. That's all your real estate agent. The attorney's office receives the contract, and once we have the executed contract, that's kind of where we take over in terms of reviewing title, ordering title. So when you say title, a lot of people are like, "What is?"
Yeah, I think title deeds, stamps.
Yeah. So everything in South Carolina, title and deed is interchangeable. The deed and the title work the word deed and title are interchangeable. The deed is the title.
Got it.
Okay.
So the first thing that we do is when we open the file is order a title abstract, meaning that an abstractor goes through the history of the property. So for a residential, we go back 40 years in the chain of title. Jump in if you want to add anything at any point.
You're doing great.
So, and then they look at all the vesting deeds, meaning they look at all the previous owners. If the people, let's say Johnny and Charlie owned it, and then the next deed, only Johnny signed the next deed. Well, Charlie still has an interest in that property, and Charlie can come back and try to knock on your door and say, hey, I still own X amount of this property. So we check the whole chain of title back 40 years.
Wow.
Why specifically 40 years?
That's
That's just the standard.
It is the standard. I believe it is basically a risk assessment type standard based on title insurance underwriters, which is you have to check at least that much for them to be willing to write the title insurance.
Okay.
And title insurance is kind of the insurance that makes the whole real estate situation happen.
Yeah.
Because without title insurance, essentially no lenders would lend any money, and then buyers.
Yeah. Well, we got to teach them that because I get a lot of people like, I don't want to pay that $1,400. I'm like, you're crazy.
Yeah,
You're nuts.
Talk about it.
Yeah. So we'll
So
get
what
there.
we do in that title abstract again is just go through that whole chain of title and issue spot. See if there are any links missing. Everything needs to link up perfectly throughout that time. So you don't
The
have
chain of
any
title.
Yeah, you don't want anyone literally the chains, we want them to all link up perfectly. That way you don't have Joe Schmo's third cousin coming back and claiming any kind of interest in the property. Part of it.
And the chain, just to tie into that, is like if someone received the property as James Smith and then they sold the property as Jim Smith, is it the same person? Maybe, but that's a question on the chain of title. It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's a likely nickname, but what if it was Dave Smith? Is it like, well, is that just his middle name?
Yeah.
So you never want that. And then you would have to basically dig in and try to figure out what happened. Is this a legitimate
And
transfer?
that's part of what you do, right? You
Yeah.
do name verifications or social verifications. On
So
that.
yeah, so when we do receive that chain of title, then if I'm literally picturing the title abstract in my head, a little bit lower are like the different liens, right? If there's any HOA liens placed on the property, any tax liens, any mechanics liens, if someone poured cement on the property and the owner didn't pay them and they put a mechanics lien on the home. So we check that whole lien section as well.
Yeah.
In addition to, of course, any mortgages on the property as well that would need to be paid off during closing. So this abstract kind of gives us a full picture of the history, and an attorney reviews that in South Carolina. An attorney in our office every day. That's kind of besides the fun closings where we give everyone keys and, chat and take pictures and
The closing
selfies.
is what the client sees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The title review is like the real work that goes on before people see it. Because you don't get to the closing table if there's an issue at that point.
Fixing that title so they have a clean title. when they
Exactly.
purchase the
So,
property.
there are definitely times where we are resolving issues, sometimes more major, sometimes more minor. But we're kind of always working on the background, trying to issue spot them. So that's the great thing about having an attorney in South Carolina is the attorney's issue spotting, where you can see things that sometimes maybe a title company wouldn't necessarily, I think, zoom in on as much as we do.
Yeah.
We analyze some of those probates or estates. I'm knocking on Tom's door saying, hey, there's an estate or a trust question. Help me figure this out so that we can link up the chain of title.
Okay.
Of course, we tell clients when we run into issues or things that they need to know about. My preferred style is if I find an issue, I spot the issue, I try to find the resolution and solution, and then I can tell the client once I've had a solution.
Gotcha.
I think that's kind of how we all operate. We don't like to get clients really nervous or
Right.
scared
Yeah.
and then be like, stay tuned, and then play hero. I kind of like to just have it all mapped out and say, this was the issue, this is how we solved it, you're good.
Yeah.
So that's a huge part of our job, is that whole middle portion of the title part.
Okay.
Have you ever, what, can you give an example out of curiosity? What would be an unresolvable issue that you've had that where it's like, like we hit a wall here and,
I mean, the purported seller doesn't own the property.
okay.
That would be a good example.
Okay. Yeah.
Theft? Is that time theft?
It would be,
Uh-oh.
it'd be a little
We were going to sneak that one in there.
Actually, last week where someone who they misidentified, the wrong people signed the contract. The sellers, it was in a trust, and they misidentified the trustees. That person was no longer the trustee of that trust.
Okay.
The trust was revoked. There were a lot of different kinds of things going on that we had to figure out.
Okay.
Thankfully, we were able to figure it out, and we were also able to secure title insurance, which is that whole other thing I think we all want to talk about.
Well, yeah, we do, because that's the thing. So if you have like liens or things like that, that is only solvable by the seller then, right? Like if they have a federal tax lien or they have a mechanics lien, the only way to really solve that is they have to pay the money.
I mean,
right?
you as the closing attorneys can pay it as well, but obviously that's coming out of the seller's proceeds. Like it has to be paid.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the attorneys can do that, and then you bill it, basically.
Well,
Or-
you disperse all the funds
Okay.
as the closing attorney. So then you just send check to the IRS or
Got
check
it.
to South Carolina Department of Revenue.
Understood. As long as there's enough money there.
But you have to be sure that it will pay it off
Okay.
and get a release. Like if you don't have that, that's
Taxes get a little sticky, right? Those are one of the tougher ones because you've got to get that payoff.
You have to get those payoffs. But
Yes.
think for a mortgage, right? If
Yeah.
the person has a mortgage with Gateway Mortgage, you have to order the payoff from them for that final amount, principal balance, interest, everything. They get that total payoff statement, and then we collect it. So that's why as if you're on the purchaser side, right? You want to make sure that none of these things stick to the title.
Got it.
You want to make sure all of those conditions are cleared before you close the transaction, because then it becomes your purchaser's problem down the line.
Yeah.
And the first person the purchaser is going to call is us.
I was going to say, so-
first person might be the real estate agent.
it likely would be us. So, and which we would say, well, that should have been handled with title. So let's go to that then. So, getting the release and all that, do you have to wait for the release to come? Does that happen simultaneously, or is there a
Are you talking about like a mortgage?
Yeah, so, or like a lien or something. So say, you do pay it, obviously it's closed then, right? So you do it out of the proceeds, you send it in. Like, what if there's a law in getting that release? It's 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is, before you actually get it, and it never hits.
Those are a little bit of an exception because I mean, how long does it typically take? Like 3 weeks? Yeah.
They're usually pretty quick, but there is a law and a statute that describes how many days, and I found myself researching it and trying to make someone apply it because the satisfaction hasn't been recorded. For example, sometimes when people even want to flip, they buy something, then they want to flip it really quick.
Yeah.
I'm like, hold on, we want to make sure everything's satisfied and done.
Okay.
But yeah, there's statutes outlining the timeline of the satisfactions and when they have to be recorded.
Okay. So then let's bridge that to, we often get this call all the time. Hey, I got my statement, the estimate of cost, and there's this title insurance on there. Do I really need title insurance? Do they really need title insurance?
So the best way I explain title insurance is kind of the same what I've said before, is that if Joe Schmo knocks on your door and says, this is your great Mima's land, and sues you, title insurance, that is what we did during that whole title part, where we evaluated it and wrote that insurance policy. So if you have a title claim, you call your title insurance company. Same way, if a tree falls on your home, you call the homeowner's insurance company. They will resolve that for you, right? So most people do not use their title insurance.
Yeah.
But when you need to use it, you're really happy you have it.
Yeah.
Same thing with homeowners or car insurance or health insurance. It's a form of insurance. It's just a different, I just say it's kind of funky because it protects you from the day of closing into the past, whereas all your other insurances protect you from to the future.
Yeah.
Okay.
This comes up a lot with new construction. Well, I'm the first owner of the home. I got someone yesterday that said, I'm the third owner of the home. The land is not new.
Yeah.
The builder didn't build the earth.
Yeah.
They build the land. It's been conveyed and reconveyed for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So that's why we always do suggest title insurance. We think it's a great option, but of course it's completely up to a buyer whether or not they would like title insurance.
But on the other side, sometimes I'll mention, okay, your lender is requiring that you purchase title insurance for them.
For that's what I was saying.
It's optional for the buyer.
Yeah.
Lender requires it. So sometimes I just say, listen, they think it's a big enough deal to require it for your loan.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you pay a little bit more to purchase it for yourself as well.
Yeah.
to me, it makes a lot of sense.
And it only protects them.
Yes.
Correct.
You're
It
paying
doesn't
for
protect you
it.
at all.
Yeah.
It only protects them up to the value of their loan, and but and I also want to add a disclaimer. I am a licensed title insurance agent as well. So
Right. So you make money. It's a revenue stream for the company
like if
sometimes.
it's new construction, they often have their own title insurance company.
Okay.
So a lot of times an attorney's office will also write the title insurance, but they don't have to.
Okay.
I don't really think that impacts our judgment on whether it's a good idea. I think you talk to any real estate attorney, they'd say, yes, title insurance is a good idea.
Yeah. Well, we actually had to have it because, believe it or not, David Cross, a very common name,
Comedian.
there's an actor. I don't know if you know, there's a comedian. Yeah. Actor David Cross. But we were trying to refinance and they were like, oh, you've got to clear this lien. It was like a federal tax lien. I don't have a federal tax lien. What are you talking about? And sure enough, our title, because we had already, bought the house and it hadn't happened in between. And we had to use the title insurance and it somehow cleared that, that's not the right one.
So we have that come up a lot with, not that your name's common, but with common names and the way we cross-reference as soon as that appears, or even something similar. That's why we were asked for socials, because sometimes people are like, why do you need my social for this real estate transaction? It's in order so we can clear those liens or anything, judgments.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have clients sign and not the one in the same affidavit saying, this is a judgment in family court for $30,000 of child support. It's not me.
I got it.
So
There might be a David Cross who owes that, but it's not me, basically.
Yeah.
If we can't sometimes clear them with just socials, then we'll just ask you to sign it saying that it's not you. So this is something very common. That's actually a very common thing that comes up in title work.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But what you mentioned is another major benefit of title insurance is, let's say there is a title issue and you don't have title insurance. Well, now you are paying out of pocket to try to fix it, which could involve lawsuits and things like that.
Yeah.
If you have title insurance, just like with car insurance, and you get hit, the car insurance company is then defending you in court. You don't really do anything.
Yeah.
Same thing with title insurance, right?
Yeah.
Then the title insurance company lawyers are the ones who defend and clear up the title. So
So that's their role is because and just to help people understand, the reason is they're insuring it because they say, hey, this is clean. I mean, we know it's clean and we're able to now defend that because in the beginning they did all the homework. Am I right?
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And it'll come up in contracts as well. And we know marketable title versus insurable title.
What is the difference?
Okay. So marketable, marketable title means that it's free and clear of any defects. Insurable means there may be something, but that the company, the title insurance company, will still insure it.
Okay.
So like, let's say you have a plot of land and the neighbor's fence encroaches on the land.
Yeah.
Everyone knows this. Everyone has known this. That's not marketable title because, well, there's the neighbor's stuff on the land.
Yeah.
However, if previous title insurance companies have written title insurance and said, we will affirmatively cover that, then usually you can still sell the property. It's not a problem, but it's just kind of like a known issue that you have to insure over.
Got it. If I'm not mistaken, I believe, now it's been a minute since I've been in real estate school, but if say you put a building and it's on the neighbor's property and they know it and you know it, but after a certain period of time, right?
I think you're talking about adverse possession.
Yes. You're right?
It is every law student who takes property law's dream to finally find an adverse possession case.
Yeah. I ever think about hey, maybe I'll just go stake out over there and see if he notices. And then 10 years later.
Flashback to an acronym for the bar for adverse possession.
For open and notorious and hostile. And
It's always like a man in the woods in a tent.
Let's put it this way. It happens a lot more often in case law. Hypotheticals, but it does in real life.
Okay. All right.
Because in real life, the person with the fence is going to be like, yeah, I know that's my land. I'm not letting you have it. Exactly. I might let you keep your fence, and it's still my land. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
That's funny.
So we've talked a little bit about liens and titles. Let's talk about some of the fees that are involved. Sometimes there's transfer fees that people have to pay. There's HOA.
Especially here. People come here.
Enhancement fees, which is different from
Exactly.
other states.
So everything from our side when we're determining where those go, it all goes back to the contract. Always
Okay.
goes back to the contract. The contract will dictate the fees, who's paying the fees, buyer versus seller. There are definitely customs in South Carolina, and then there's customs by county even. So certain counties have a custom for who pays which fee. We're all very familiar with our fees here, and so for example, like the deed stamps you were talking about.
Yeah.
When there's a transfer of property in the county, there's a one-time tax, transfer tax, deed stamp tax. Our custom here is that the seller pays that, and that's outlined in the contract.
Yeah.
HOA, most of the time, the purchaser pays the community enhancement fee, which is an HOA fee that's a certain percentage point of the purchase price
Yep.
that will get added onto the HOA statement, one-time fees.
Yeah.
Other fees are prorated, right? So HOA fees, that is, if you start living there on the 15th, we prorate it based from the 15th until the end of the month. But
Or
those
my favorite one, the propane tank.
the propane
Yeah.
tank,
It's like, and this is a proration of $3.14.
Right.
And
it comes up a lot. People, they're very, very adamant sometimes about
Oh,
the
yeah.
propane. But that's another payoff, and that's what we have in our data sheets. Like the first question when we open the file on a sale, you may see it is there a propane tank? If so, please let us know so we can call and order a payoff
Yeah.
statement for the propane tank.
Yeah.
But the HOA community fees, that also just, again, sometimes it's a negotiating factor, and you guys know that really well as well, that the seller may pay the community enhancement fee.
Mhm.
Typically it is the buyers, but that's something in the contract process that can be used as a negotiation piece as well.
Yeah, I think most people don't know that they can negotiate that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
almost everything's negotiable in
It
the
is.
contract. I mean,
Well,
There's
my
transfer
favorite
taxes.
on the HOA statements is we order the HOA statement from the HOA as the buyer's attorney, and then it has all those fees listed out there, and sometimes they'll say to be paid by purchaser, to be paid by seller. It
yeah,
doesn't matter to me. I
Yeah.
go back to the contract,
that's right.
because sometimes someone's like, no, the seller's supposed to pay that. It says it on the HOA statement. I'm like, let's go back to the contract. The amount of times I pull up a contract a day, every transaction.
Yeah.
And I urge buyers, anyone listening, read your contract. Look
Well,
at it.
it's why it's important to have an agent. Because I remember when I first came here, you talk about customs, and I came from Charlotte. When I saw that on there, I was like, every single contract I'm only paid by seller. I just put it on there, and you wouldn't believe how many times it got through.
Mhm.
And then I
Yeah.
get the call,
At the end.
and they're like, "Well, wait a minute, you checked? No, that's not how we do it here." And the buyer always, I said, "It's in the contract."
The
I'm
contract.
sorry. I mean,
Exactly.
you missed
and
it.
that's what we'll go back to over and over again.
Yeah.
People are like, well, I didn't mean to agree to that. It's like, well, then you need a contract addendum
Yeah.
because you did agree to that.
Yeah, that's
right?
exactly right. And it's totally negotiable. And again, you gotta do it, know when to use it and pull it out. But yeah,
I had it happen this morning where the other side, the attorney on the other side was like, no, this is a buyer fee. This is a buyer HOA fee. Screenshot the part of the contract. It's marked seller.
yeah,
I'm like, I understand, and 99% of the time it is a buyer fee, but
Yeah.
it says seller on there, so we have to follow the contract.
yeah,
And
yeah.
It sucks sometimes to be on the other end of that.
Well, I hate to say it, but and this is for you too, Hunter, who's not on camera. Just because you have your real estate license, you got to be on top of things because you got to read, you got to know what it says, and you got to make sure you're paying attention and not just go through the motions like something.
That's kind of my PSA to all real estate agents is Butler College, myself, I can say I am available to my agents. If you call me and say, hey, I don't know what to do with this contract, I rather face it head on before it's signed
Yeah,
than afterwards, because then at that point when the contract gets to my office executed, my hands are tied.
that's right.
So I think we've had that happen a few times where we were chatting on like texting or something on a weekend about insurable or marketable title. That was us together.
I don't remember. Maybe it was the other David Cross.
Huh. Yeah, I've got some terrible leads.
So
Yeah, he still owes me for that.
Terrible, right?
that guy. So
So yeah, I just kind of talking about the issues that could come up with title, right? What happens after closing? So say we close the transaction and the seller moves in and all of a sudden there's an issue with the property and it was not disclosed on our forms. How is that handled?
So we've had that happen where the first thing again, pull up the contract, pull up the disclosures, and see what was stated on there.
Yeah.
And honestly, typically at Butler College, we do not engage in litigation of those kinds of matters.
Yeah, so there's two different things.
So
Yeah.
it would be more so I would refer to an attorney that specializes in that kind of post-closing litigation of a failure to disclose or like a blatant misrepresentation.
And for the podcast listeners, transactional law is usually everyone's kind of coming together, trying to agree, everyone's happy. Litigation is when you go sue each other in court. It's the one you see on TV and in the movies all the time.
Yeah.
Transactional law is incredibly boring to put on a TV show or a movie, so that's why we're never.
Love it.
Yeah. But it's great for a podcast.
What she was talking about earlier, so litigation, yeah, you're getting all the, people mad at each other and one side wins, one side loses. But that's not usually what we're trying to do. But if it does get to that point, then there's usually different lawyers who handle that, who specialize in litigation.
And that is a huge point, because we actually had this come up with a deal, and our client was upset because the attorney says, "Hey, we don't handle that." And he's like, "But you're my real estate attorney." And so that's a big distinction for people.
I'd say that's almost every real estate attorney I'm familiar with doesn't do litigation if they do closings. You would do one or the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys work with somebody out of curiosity? Would you, if we had a situation they needed, do you have somebody that locally that you work or refer them to, or out of curiosity?
Yeah, there are a couple we will refer people to. The biggest problem though, is money. So if you're in that situation, you're going to have to pay the attorney basically to start litigating.
Yeah.
It's not cheap.
Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah, because often...
And I love that.
That's going to be a hashtag.
Is the juice worth the squeeze?
That's my litigation days.
You've got a $4,000 claim potentially, and it's going to cost you $15,000 to litigate it.
Is the juice worth the squeeze?
No. Yeah.
Because a whole lot of people are big on principle up until it comes to paying the legal fees, and then they decide the principle's not worth it.
I had that happen. I use that phrase daily in family law. Yeah. Someone would want to argue about a 2006 Honda Civic, and they were going to pay me $5,000 to draft a motion and argue it. And I'm like, the Honda Civic's worth $3,000.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's the principle. And I'm like, okay. But basically we had a Walmart rule in family law litigation. If you can go buy it at Walmart, I'm not going to argue about it.
Yeah.
We're not arguing about flat screen TVs because, again, it's just the money you spend. And then I felt like sometimes it's my, not obligation, but my duty to tell them, listen, just calm down.
Yeah.
And, figure out if it's worth it. But
put your ego aside.
If it's something huge, like a blatant misrepresentation on the disclosure, of course, that would sometimes warrant definitely going forward with litigation.
Right.
It's kind of that balancing act of, is it worth it?
Try to separate how mad and wronged and aggrieved you are versus how much is this actually going to cost?
Yeah, exactly.
Because litigation is not free.
Yes.
Well, I think the main point too is we have to tell everybody, and I didn't know that's what it was called, transactional law, because that's really what it is. It's like they're there to handle the transaction, they're not here to handle any of the other stuff. And that's what everybody out there listening needs to understand. That's who you're hiring and what your role is. So that they don't mistake the two, thinking you're going to represent me if I get mad at them and want to sue them.
And it also happens a lot where people don't understand that we're not the lender.
Yeah.
Yes.
That happens a good amount
the real estate agent. We're just the attorney.
We don't do anything wrong. So
of course not.
We're by the book. Tom, I want to switch gears to you because you said.
I'm ready.
So for those clients, because you said most of them are relocating here from other states, being retirees, I'm assuming a lot of them already have wills, trusts, power of attorneys, all that in place. So they're coming from New York, they're moving here full time, they're leaving it all behind. What do they need to do with their estate?
So there's kind of two answers to this. There's the, oh my gosh, what happens if you get into a car crash and die tomorrow answer? And the, what should you do assuming you have more time and you can plan? So a lot of times people panic. They read on the internet. They're like, oh, what do I do? If your estate planning documents, and by estate planning, it's wills or trusts or powers of attorney, are validly executed in the state that you were living in when you executed them, they're going to be valid in South Carolina.
Okay.
Wow.
So it's like a reciprocal.
Yeah,
Okay.
the U.S. Constitution has full faith and credit. So basically, we're going to say, all right, that's valid.
Okay.
So that is kind of the, oh my gosh, you get hit by a car, what happens type scenario.
He's a resident optimist.
At my group, they became doom and gloom team. And me and the life insurance guy.
The doom and gloom team. I can see the podcast now.
Yeah, it'd be very optimistic, right? No, but the longer answer is, okay, let's say in your example, you're moving from New York. How long ago did you do the will? Like, was it 5 months before you moved, in which case maybe nothing's changed other than the place you live? Or was it 15 years ago when your son, who was in high school, is now 30 years old? And basically the people you would want making decisions for you are different.
Yeah.
So what we usually say is go see an attorney, have them review the documents, have them review your situation in life where you are right now, and see, are these still the right documents for you, or do you want to have an update?
Got it.
And we do complimentary estate planning consultations for that reason. We get a lot of real estate clients. A lot of people have this exact question. Sometimes I meet with people and I say, listen, if it were up to me, I'd just kind of leave it as is, unless you just love paying legal fees, which I do like. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But
You're very honest about it.
But yeah, if they don't need to update, they don't need to update. But sometimes it is a situation where they had a major life circumstance change. Let's say they were renting in one place and now they own. Their net worth is increased by a significant amount. So they had a will-based plan, but actually a trust-based plan would make more sense. So it's just worth talking to an attorney. But yeah, if you get hit by a car and the worst thing happens, yes, your documents should be valid if they were validly executed somewhere else.
Okay, that's good to know.
You say something really interesting, will-based versus trust-based. Can we talk a little bit about that difference?
Sure, I'll try not to bore all your podcast listeners, but essentially
I'm going to take a nap.
We'll buckle you in.
He was up twice last night.
All right, quick version is what happens when you die, how are we going to handle your assets?
Okay.
So a will is the traditional one that most people are most familiar with, which is you give a set of instructions. You say, if I die, here's who I want to get my stuff, and here's who I want to be my executor, which we call personal representative in South Carolina.
Okay.
Same thing, but we just renamed it.
Of course we did.
It was too easy to understand, so we renamed it. And the purpose of the will is you take it to the probate court and you say, hey, this person died. I want to be personal representative. Here's where they name me. The judge says, okay, they officially appoint you. And then the probate court supervises the process of basically creditor claims and asset distribution.
Okay.
In South Carolina, it's typically, I'd say, a year to a year and a half
in probate.
In probate.
Okay.
That's assuming it's non-contested.
Yeah.
If
Does
it's
the
contested,
estate pay for that? Does the estate pay for the judge? Okay, so they have to pay for that supervision?
There are probate fees related to the value of the estate. So the more valuable the estate is, the higher the fees are.
Okay, so like your estate is going to be very expensive.
Hopefully not. The other type of plan is a trust-based plan.
Nice.
Which is
You like that segue?
Yeah, I really appreciate it. So a trust-based plan essentially says, I don't want to do probate. Like that's usually the goal behind it. Yeah. And you say, all right, I'm going to create a trust, which is effectively, I like to use the metaphor of a container, but it's actually just a legal relationship between different parties. But if you think about it like a container, anything you put in the trust does not count toward probate when you die. So if you put all of the stuff you own in the trust, you don't have any probate assets, therefore you don't have to do probate. So I mean, that's the short version of why people would do it.
House goes into businesses can go in.
Yep.
Houses.
Yep.
Cars.
Yep.
You name it.
Yes.
Okay. Children.
No, they're not property.
Yeah. Well, really?
I know.
Well, all right.
So that answers your question, will versus trust. Okay.
Yes.
So that's the basics of the decision people make, and which one's right for which person really depends on circumstances, life situation, amount of assets. Like, just quick rule of thumb, if you have property in 5 different states, it's going to be a huge pain in the rear end if you don't have a trust-based plan, because you're going to have a secondary or ancillary probate in every state you own property.
Wow. So the trust then would be all encompassing. So it's it would cover everything, everywhere, period.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And how,
Name it funny things.
Yeah, that's true.
It's my favorite
Funniest
part.
name. Yeah, what's the funniest name you've seen?
One of my clients, she's kind of fun, and her name begins with a T, and so she's like, you know what, I want a fun name. I'm going to name it the T Money Trust. And so, yeah, that's the name of her.
T-Money.
Yeah.
I like it.
We're still working on ours, my husband and I, with Tom, and my husband really wants in God. So it's in God we
Trust.
in God we. Like, do you know how many times it's gonna get messed up? He's like, it'd be in God we
million.
trust.
Gotta be so many in God we's out there.
But everyone's are kind of boring, so I think that's the really fun part of it. And people don't get to name their trust fund things. So you say and come up with something fun.
Yeah. So
That's awesome.
fun trust names are great. Shorter trust names are better than longer, though.
Yeah.
Because if you have to put it like on a bank form or on a car title, you really just want to keep it
So
short.
that's why I love that one client that goes to the bank and says T Money Trust.
I know, right?
So when I say living trusts and stuff, like, are there different types of trusts?
Yes. So the trust I was just talking about is a revocable trust.
Okay.
That is like 99% of your trusts that you're going to see, particularly as real estate agents.
Okay.
So a revocable trust is a trust that the person who created it can change, essentially.
That's cool.
So you create it and you want to leave all of your money to the one son you love the most. And then all of a sudden I didn't say it was you. And then later you change your mind. You're like, maybe I'll split my assets equally among my kids.
Got it.
So that would be a revocable trust. You can change it. The other main type is an irrevocable trust where you cannot change it once you create it.
Oh.
And there's different reasons why you do it, but most of them relate to tax or control type things. They're not
A billionaire that's a 70 with a 30-year-old girlfriend.
That's a good example. Yeah, I mean, that's every one of our clients. Right? No, it's usually, that's not appropriate for most people.
Yeah.
But for the normal revocable trust, that's the key difference. Now, the living part is, did you create it while you were alive or not?
Mm-hmm.
You can actually create a trust out of a will. So like you die, you go probate. At the very end of probate, then you create a trust. It's called a testamentary trust. I almost never do them because if you would like to have a trust, I'd rather just do it now and fund it and not go through probate.
Yeah.
You can.
That is strange.
And
I'm going to get to the other side and figure it out, and then I'll send messages like,
so yeah,
here's what I want.
Living just means that people did it while they're alive.
Okay, I got it. Okay.
So, but you don't have to have revocable or living in the name.
Okay.
So if I'm naming trusts, I typically do people's initials or last name or fund names if they have one.
All right. So, Tom, I want to get back to let's talk about taxation in terms of estates. Okay. So somebody moves here. They move from Pennsylvania, let's say. They've got everything set up. They move here. And are there tax implications on their estate in South Carolina?
So your taxes on your estate are going to be based on the state you live in when you pass away. So South Carolina does not have a state estate tax. Some states do. I believe Pennsylvania is one of them, so that's a good example.
Okay.
And there's a federal estate tax. However, when you hear about the federal estate tax, keep in mind it does not actually apply to most people because the exemption amount, the amount you get to leave for free, is so large.
Okay.
So it's about $13 million per person right now.
Oh.
It is scheduled
Change.
to.
Yeah.
It is scheduled to.
I wish I fell under that.
I know, right? It is scheduled to be cut in half by the end of 2025. The Tax Cuts and Job Act is not extended, or they don't pass a new tax cut bill or something.
Oh, okay. It'll retro back.
That's per person. So another thing that you can do is you can port an unused amount from one person to another. So let's say, David, unfortunately, you meet an untimely demise before your lovely wife, and let's say you die with $2 million in assets, and the exemption amount is 7 at that time. Well, you didn't use 5.
Okay.
Well, Dale can then say, I want to port your 5 that you didn't use to her estate.
Wow.
And then she's going to get 5 plus whatever the amount is when she passes away.
Wow.
Okay. Well, that's great. So that's really going to apply for people who own businesses, I was.
Oh, yeah.
That's they're going to get hit if they got a business worth anything.
Yes, I mean, it's businesses, significant investments, really large real estate investors, things like that. But yeah, South Carolina is a good place to die in that respect.
Okay. So do you have to be a resident of the state? So what if it's a second home?
It depends where your domicile is, and domicile and resident are.
You're getting all fancy on me.
Same way for now. So it depends. Basically, where'd you live?
Mm-hmm.
And there's factors to look at where you live. But I think that's a good segue for the most common question we get about taxes in real estate, which is the 4% and 6%.
Yes,
right?
let's go there. Let's dive into that. Yeah. Let's start on what is that question? Like 4%, 6%.
Yeah.
Now we're talking real estate
In
taxes.
South Carolina, every county, they do have a 4% tax or a 6% tax. So each county determines, you pay your taxes to the county for your property. You own a home, you get a tax bill from the county you live in. There are two different forms you can get. The 4% known as the primary resident rate, or the 6% known as the secondary resident rate. It's not, some people think it's 4% of my purchase price or 6%.
People freak out. They're
That's
like,
the first thing that
Yeah.
it's not. That's just what they're called. The millage rate and the calculation there's literally a calculator online where you can plug it in because the calculation is pretty complicated. It's not something that real estate attorneys or anyone actually calculates. There's an online calculator for that.
And Beaufort County has that.
So Beaufort County has one, Jasper County, and it will differ from county to county. For example, so anyway, let me just back up. So the primary resident rate, when you buy a home in South Carolina, they automatically lock you in on the 6%, the higher tax amount.
When you close, right?
When you close.
Yeah.
So, or anytime there's a deed change, they will lock you into the 6% until you prove otherwise that you are a resident. So there are different steps you have to take. And the perks of closing with Butler College is we give you a cheat sheet with step 1, 2, and 3.
Yes, you do.
Yep. So step 1 is to pay your vehicle taxes. Step 2 is to get South Carolina driver's license. And step 3 is to complete that 4% application, the primary resident application.
Okay.
And the application does have different things that they would like as well, such as tax returns, things of that nature, to prove that you are a resident of South Carolina so that you can qualify for that lower tax rate.
Yeah.
In addition, if you're over 65 and have resided in South Carolina for a year, there's an additional homestead exemption, which will knock some money off of that tax amount as well.
And
But
homestead is not legal residence in South Carolina because lots of
In
other
Florida.
states call that
Yeah.
homestead, but
Okay.
they're two different tax breaks in South
In
Carolina.
Florida,
Oh.
the primary resident, they know it as the homestead. So anytime we have people from Florida closing, they're like, oh, the homestead. I'm like, well, the homestead and the 4% are different.
Yeah.
165 and over, one is the primary resident rate.
Primary residence.
Very
What-
common question, just really quick,
Yeah.
is we're married. So what if my husband's on the deed and I'm not? Part of the 4% application is, are you married?
Yeah.
Can I say I'm not? I'm like, well, no.
Because that's a lie. And I'm like, oh.
You sign on the bottom that
Yeah.
you swear and attest that, what information you're giving is true. So
Right.
the only way if you are married and would like to do it that way is if you showed the county a divorce order or a separation order.
Mm-hmm.
So there are, people think they can finagle the system, but it's pretty clear cut. If you qualify, you get that 4%. You just have to show them that evidence.
I've actually had that happen with a client. They thought they were being tricky, and they'd asked me ahead of time. They had a place in Colorado. He didn't want to give up yet. He still had some work out there. He's a contractor. They bought a house here, and they tried to sneak it in. And I get a phone call. He's like, hey, they're billing me, whatever the amount was. And I said, well, did you change your residence? And he said, well, no, I kept my Colorado residence. I said, well, I told you you got caught because,
Yeah.
they just put her on deed. He goes, well, she's the only one on deed there. I said, you guys are married
Yeah.
and you're living there, so you're not getting it.
And also, it sounds like a 2% difference. Or it's like, oh, it's nothing. It's 2%. But it really is
It
a
can
huge
be
difference, especially in Jasper County. It's triple. So
Yeah.
let's say if your taxes are estimated to be $3,000 at the primary rate, at the secondary, it can be close to 10.
Yeah.
9 to 10.
Yeah, I just tell people it's the market value. That's what the 6% is. So if your market value is $100,000, then 6% is the 6,000. Then the millage rate is off that 6,000. So it creates your taxable rate, basically. The 6% or the 4%.
Super boring. Everyone's going to go to sleep. Like the actual calculation is,
Yeah.
market value times whatever percent times the
your
millage
rate.
rate, and then if it's primary, subtracting out school fees.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
But the
Just
that's
use
why
the calculator.
I'm trying to just be like, it's, figure it out. It's a 0.25% or 5.
yours great, and then you can plug in.
Hanford has it though.
Jasper has one.
No,
It
but
was-
Jasper's
it was down for a couple months.
Yeah.
Oh, so is it back up? Okay. I thought they just didn't want to really show people the difference.
Jasper County, it's a work in progress, okay?
It is a work in progress.
Definitely was down for several months.
Is it back up now?
There,
I think
it's
so.
back up, and then there's another calculator on there as well that you can use for it. But we do that for each county, and I do it at the end of every closing. That's my homework for the client, and I scare them with the numbers because the number is a drastic difference.
It's huge. I mean, most people, I've literally had them make, because I'll give you an example, Margaritaville versus Sun City.
Huge.
And I'll tell people, I'll give them their taxes. They're like, it's the same price, same everything, but my taxes are double in Jasper County. It's 4 miles down the road. I'm like, yeah.
At Sun City, the difference.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sun City North, Sun City South.
Yeah.
And I, not to work for Jasper County here, I will say they have hopes of getting closer to tax equalization, but their tax base is just much smaller than Beaver
Right.
County right now.
Yeah.
And it's growing, so they're building things.
Leaps and bounds,
yeah.
it's growing.
So-
Yeah. But, they are, I call them, I have a term for the speed of things down here. It's called Southern Fast.
Southern fast.
It's a special kind of slow.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Sorry, I know that you're born here, or not born here.
So
Moved here when
Raised
you were
here, yeah.
raised here.
circle back on that. So 4% is for residents, 6% is for second homes and investment properties.
Exactly. So if
Right.
you own a home in Bluffton and then you get an apartment and you start renting that out, that apartment, your home, you would want to claim it, I'm assuming, as your primary.
Yeah,
And then the apartment as the secondary, where that would be the 6%. So you always have to keep in mind, if you are buying investment properties, that they will be charged at that 6% rate.
no matter what.
And if you're looking online at someone else's property and you're on some website and it shows last year's taxes, it might or might not be what you're going to pay because
That's
it depends on whether they were at 4 or they were at 6.
And the market value resets to the purchase price.
Once it
Yeah.
sells. Yeah.
So they bought it for $250, you're buying it for $5. That's the new market value. That's the thing. So let's get back.
And I do want to clarify one thing. The legal residence, you will not automatically get it on your primary. You
No.
always are going to have to apply.
Yes,
like,
you do.
Well, so
Always.
They will apply the 6%.
really funny thing that happened is my husband and I, we bought our house as boyfriend, girlfriend. I had my maiden name on there. And it was like my first couple months working. And I talked to Tom about it. I was like, hey, I'm going to change it to my married name just so that everything's nice and pretty. Not necessarily legally necessary, but just so that it looks fine. And we change our tenancies, things like that. Same people, Natalia and Miles, same house at the farm. Since there was a new deed filed, triggered the 6%, and I had to reapply.
Have to reapply for it.
Even though everything stayed the same essentially except the name and the tenancy, but just because the tax assessor's office said, hey, there's a new deed on this property, automatically reapplied the 6. So you have to stay on it.
Same thing if you transfer your property into trust. If you change title at all, you're
Yeah.
going to have to reapply.
Title or deed again.
Yeah, we did that
interchangeable.
when we changed our deed. I forget what we did when we refinanced, and we got billed the next time, and I had to do it again. So what will they accept? Because you said tax returns, but if they're just moving here, they obviously haven't filed tax returns here. So what are the other things that they're going to accept as proof that it's your primary residence?
So they have a list. And then personally, I remember myself when I started doing it, I just give them everything I can but the kitchen sink, right?
It's like
Give
the
them
DMV.
everything I bring my everything to the DMV, same thing with the tax assessor's office. And then
Yeah.
as those items come in, such as a tax return, you can supplement it to the application.
Yeah.
So sometimes what the tax assessor will do is call it like a temporary lock-in, and then they'll do the permanent lock-in where you're locked in. But then again, the caveat with the permanent lock-in is unless there's a change in the deed. Such
Gotcha.
as quit claiming it into your business or your LLC or your trust, or adding grandma onto the deed for whatever reason. That re-triggers that 6%.
Yeah, the key thing to remember is it is an exception, and you have to apply to get the exception. So if you change anything, you have to reapply to get the exception.
Yeah.
And
Because the default is you get charged the full 6%.
Gotcha.
And technically you can get refunded from the county, but I always tell people, imagine trying to pry money out of the county's hands.
Oh,
Love Beaufort County.
Yeah.
Trying to get money back from Beaufort County.
trying to
love
get
their
money
story.
back from any government entity. I mean, good luck. Yeah. If I recall, this the other thing too is they have to change their driver's license. That's number one, right? Because a lot of people don't want to do that. I tell them you got to do it. You do have to do the whole DMV thing, get your car registered here, because a lot of times they don't want to do that. And I think that's actually a requirement anyways, right? Like that's a
The first
state law.
step is you're going to pay the vehicle tax and you
Mhm.
take that receipt to the DMV,
Yeah,
because the DMV won't even let you do that until you have the vehicle stuff.
that's right.
Then you do that part of the DMV, and then that's when you get into the actual application process, where then they ask you for those first two steps.
Yeah.
That's why we have it in that order
Okay.
to follow that. But the list of different, it'll be, tax returns as we discussed, driver's license, just proving that you actually live here and not
Utility bill.
Colorado.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I have them they try to get sneaky with it.
Yeah.
I always try to warn them, it's not going to happen. You're going to get.
One of the questions on the application is, are you claiming legal residency in any other state? So you can't say no if you are, otherwise that's lying, or you can't say yes and then expect to get the
Exactly.
There's some more intricacies too. For example, my mom, my sister, and I are on a deed together. Well, my mom lives there. How do we get the 4% for that, right?
Yeah.
So at least 25% of ownership of the person applying, they have to at least own 25% of the property.
Oh, is that what? I didn't even know that.
So we like to draft our deeds at like 26 or 27, just so that there's no discrepancy.
Oh, wow.
On the percentages.
Whoops.
So yeah, that's where attorneys also come in. We come in a good bit with the deeds and the drafting and the ways to make sure that you can qualify for those kinds of things.
That is a nugget, because I did not know that. That's really good.
Or also,
time to leave now.
but
That's all right.
came in with homestead exemption, because my mom and my sister and I are on it. My mom's over 65. My sister and I are not. So she applied for the homestead, and they prorate that 1/3, since only one person of the three is over 65.
Oh,
So
my
just on this
goodness.
one deed of my own, I learned so much.
Yeah, that's great. That is
With the
really.
help of Tom.
And what I'm curious, though, is is that like that in other states, or are we sort of unique in how we do it? Or, I mean,
As far as I know, every state treats it a little bit differently. Like the concept that you would get a tax break because you live there, I think is pretty common.
okay.
But how they apply it, what the rules are.
Mhm.
Sometimes, I mean, I don't do that many closings. I do occasionally as coverage for her or Ashley, the other attorney in our office.
Yeah.
But, sometimes I'll get a question like, well, how would I want to qualify in New Jersey or Colorado? It's like, you really need to check out the laws there, do the math on a calculator, and figure out which one makes the most sense for you. All we can tell you is, how do you apply for the legal residency here?
Yeah.
These are the steps. If it makes sense for you to do so, that's going to be between you and typically a CPA or someone like that.
Yeah.
Just wanted to change just a little bit the topic. Something you had mentioned was tenancies here in South Carolina. Could we touch on that a little bit? Because there's different ways you could hold title.
Yeah, of course. So there are different tenancies, and that's one of the first things we ask when, the file's being open. So joint tenants with rights of survivorship, not tenants in common. And these words get thrown around, and people, think they know it from another state that they had a deed from, but it means different things. So in South Carolina,
different in different states, they
Yes.
do different things.
Oh, wow.
because I've read deeds from other states, and I'm look at Tom, I'm like, what does this even mean?
Yeah.
So joint tenants with rights of survivorship is the most common for married couples. So if one person passes away, all of their interest goes automatically to the other person.
Okay.
Tenants in common is the other one. So I think do you use the loaf of bread analogy, Lions?
Yeah.
Do you want to do it?
Sure, fine.
Go for it.
Let's do a loaf of bread.
All right, let's pretend like you have a loaf of bread. Joint tenancy,
Bread always
both of you
confuses me.
two, in this case, would own the entire loaf of bread. You each own an undivided interest in the property.
Mm-hmm.
And if one of you passes away, well, the other person just owns it. It doesn't go through probate, doesn't do anything. With tenants in common, just pure tenants in common is kind of the complete opposite approach, which is you each own a specified percentage of the property, or you each have one of you has 5 slices of bread, one of you has 15 slices of bread, but you've the property. So
Backwards element to the podcast at the next space, okay?
really, okay, tenants in common, biggest difference. It does go through probate. So let's say I'm picking on you. You die first again. Your 5 slices are going to go through your either will or trust or however you've set it up. It goes according to your estate plan. Your 15, you still own them. You can do whatever you want with them. You could sell your 5 to somebody else. You don't have. So tenants in common, pure tenants in common is used a lot more often if it's people who are not married.
Yeah, I was going to say, I see that. Yeah.
I don't know, 2 businesses.
My husband and I did that, and that's what we did on our deed. We changed it after we were married to joint tenants.
Or I've had it to where, guy has 2 kids, or the girlfriend has a couple kids, and they are both putting the same money in, but they want their part to go to their kids. They want their part to go to their kids type situation.
And those
Or their
percentages
share.
can also be determined however the parties want.
So how does that work
There's
then?
one more deed I didn't mention,
Oh,
which is the weirdest one that's only South Carolina, which is tenants in common with an indestructible right of survivorship, which is a combination of both of them.
Okay.
So it avoids probate and it has specified percentages of ownership. And it is the other attorney in our office, Ashley's favorite deed. She loves that deed.
That's how I did mine.
Yeah, you did yours that way? Yeah.
As an indestructible?
Yeah.
I just like the word.
It is cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like an Avengers movie.
Yeah.
The biggest difference between
As exciting as it gets.
All right.
the biggest difference between it and joint tenancy is the specified ownership percentage.
Yeah.
So whether you want to say Dale owns 3/4 of the property, you own 1/4, or whether it's just you guys both own the whole loaf of bread. There are some other differences too, but I mean, that's kind of the biggest difference in terms of why people typically pick it.
So what happens then? Couple that are dating, they're not married, they go in, tenants in common, one of them dies. Do they have to liquidate that property?
It depends. Like,
To get their...
if let's say the first person dies without a will. Okay, well, it's going to go to wherever the state statute says.
Okay.
Which is not going to be their boyfriend or girlfriend because there's no official relationship there. It's going
Yeah.
to be to like their parents or their kids if they have any, or brothers or sisters. And then effectively you just have two people own it, whoever, or multiple people. So the half of it would be owned by the heirs
Oh, that could get
of the
tricky.
person who died, and the other half would be owned by the person who survived.
And
We've had the boyfriend and the stepkid that don't like each other,
Oh,
or
yeah.
the husband and the
Oh,
stepfather. And with censity and proximity, we get some interesting ones.
oh my gosh.
Or suddenly
Because,
people are owning it together and they absolutely hate each other.
I mean, and what happens if one wants to sell and the other doesn't want to sell? They won't sign the deed. I mean, that
Then
could...
eventually you sue in court and you force a sale because unless one person can buy the other person out, I mean, it's
Oh, really? Oh, wow. What a mess.
so.
That's why
Remind me never to do that.
estate planning.
Yeah.
Please.
So like the example
Golly.
you gave earlier about, say, second marriage for people, they buy a house in Sun City and they each put money in and they want their share of the house to go to their kids.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Almost always the answer is going to be they're going to need trusts. Each of their trusts owns half of the house. Then the other person would have an occupancy right after the first person dies. So basically the person could stay, but
Okay.
ultimately whenever they move out, whenever they die, that money will go to the person's kids who passed away.
Got it. So it's an
So-
occupancy right. So
Yeah.
that's what the protection would be.
Yeah.
I remember we've had that happen too a couple of times where the daughter was mad. Why does mom's new husband get to stay in the house? Well, there was an occupancy right.
See, Asher, this is good because we have obviously so many people who are active adult. We have a big, large, and that's a nugget you need to take away right there if you're going to do that because we have a lot of that. A lot of the second marriages and the kids, they want to split it up and they need to have that.
And while we're on tenancy and deeds and all that sort of stuff, I just want to say one
Yeah.
public service announcement.
Yeah.
Sometimes people, very well intentioned,
When I-
they want to basically avoid probate. I get it. Nobody likes going through probate. And they say, I'm just going to add my child on my deed.
Stop talking about me and my mom like that.
That's
Did real estate.
And they do it and they say it's joint tenancy. So whoever survives, that person just owns it outright and you avoid probate. It's great.
Yeah.
But disclaimer, this is not legal advice for any one individual. This is not tax advice, but there's a major tax problem, which is real estate tends to go up in value over time.
Yeah, so you have a capital gain.
So you basically,
Sorry.
no, but you're on the right track. So the cost basis of the property, if you're selling, is when you acquired it. So let's say you are 85 years old, you acquire the property, you live there until you're 95, you pass away. If you leave it to someone else, the cost basis resets upon the date of death.
Okay.
So let's say you bought it for $500,000, it's worth $1 million. 10 years later, your kids sell it for $1 million. Their tax is 0 on the capital gains because they effectively acquired it for $1 million. They sold it for $1 million. On the other hand, if you put your kid on title, right when you buy it, their cost basis is $500,000. It appreciates to $1 million.
They got $500,000.
So yes, you avoided probate, but you had a huge tax bill as a result. So please do that. Anyone listening?
These are some nuggets. Good episode.
Yeah.
You guys need to watch that. They need to go in the preview. That's good. That's good.
All right. So no more tax.
No, but that's good. I didn't even know that.
Fraud talk.
Well, fraud.
Oh boy, we're going to there.
Topic. Well, let's talk about wire fraud because I know that's a big issue that we face a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in South Carolina, our preferred and the best way, to receive funds for closing is a wire. A domestic wire is directly wired from the client's account into our account. Instead of checks, which can obviously bounce, take 10 days to clear. Cashier's checks, we have certain laws and rules of how much we can take as a cashier check. It's less than $50,000.
Oh,
So
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so to a closing. So the preferred method is always a wire. Of course, with wires comes wire fraud and issues that sometimes arise. So, for example, we always give out wiring instructions immediately. Anytime you get wiring instructions in your life, it doesn't matter if it's for a real estate transaction or anything else, you always want to call and confirm those wiring instructions, right? Our wiring instructions and many attorneys, they don't change. Those are our wiring instructions and they'll never change. The problem with wire fraud isn't that anyone's hacking into our systems because we have, secure portals, firewalls, we have the utmost security we can given the nature of the work we do every day. It's someone hacking into the client's Gmail.
Yeah.
And they see they're communicating with real estate agents, they're communicating with attorneys. Oh, they're going to be wiring money soon.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. And then they see our, data and info and they try to replicate it and send our wiring instructions have changed. Please see attached.
Yeah.
And the person,
We
if
had
they
a
don't,
typo in our earlier right?
Yeah.
Anything like that.
anything like that.
Emails look like your emails.
Exactly. And then there'll sometimes even be a phone number there. So you never want to call the phone number from the wiring instructions you receive because they'll put their own number there to confirm and they'll confirm them.
Yeah.
So even when I get wiring instructions for other attorneys in the area, I go on Google, find that business's phone number and call them directly. Not use the number that's on the top right corner.
Yeah.
Because that could just be the scammer, right? So that's a huge thing with wire fraud is just to be very vigilant. Sometimes we've noticed clients have called and said, we got wiring instructions from you, but the grammar was off. Like it didn't sound like proper English. Like an attorney wouldn't write that email. And I'm like, well, there's the red
Sound
flag.
like somebody from Nigeria, maybe.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with being from Nigeria.
Or common words misspelled, or the property address doesn't look fully right.
Yeah.
And real estate's particularly basically lucrative for criminals for wire fraud simply because in everyday life, if I said, hey, can you send me $10,000? You go, what? That's a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
But in real estate, you'd say, oh, yeah, sure, that's a normal earnest money deposit.
Yeah.
Or I need to wire an additional $300,000 for cash to close, and you think nothing of it.
That's right.
And so just the amounts are so large that it creates economic opportunity for criminals. And even if they only get one out of every 10,000 people,
that's a big payoff.
It's a big payoff.
Yeah.
And of course, if that ever happens, we have to get the FBI involved. It becomes a huge thing. So we, from the get-go, in all of our welcome packets, emails, please be vigilant. These are our wiring instructions. They'll never, ever change. And also, while we're on that topic of a PSA, is for real estate clients to know what their wire limits are, to talk to their bank.
Okay.
For example, it happens a lot where we remind people and then the day before closing when they have to send their cash to close, my bank only does in person and they're in West Virginia.
Yes. I've had that happen.
Real example, this lady had to get on a plane and go back to West Virginia because she had a credit union and she could not do it otherwise. It had to be in person, which also makes sense because anyone can pick up the phone then and wire money out of your account. So she had to present herself in person. So before any closing, just speak with
know
your bank.
your bank.
Yeah, know where their locations are, know what their limits are. And just because your friend has a Wells Fargo account and can wire $50,000 a day doesn't mean you have the same limit. Your limit can be $25,000 a day.
So there are legit, banks have, to your example, I mean, we have a lot of clients, they'll purchase a new construction and it's a $600,000 wire. So there's limits to that. How would they do that? Would they do it in pieces or?
They'll do limits on like the app. Like you can log into your Bank of America
I
app.
got you.
They only allow 5,000 via wire.
Okay.
Anything above 5, you have to go in person.
Go in person.
Some people are like, oh, I checked. I can wire off my phone. No problem. And then they try to do it at the closing table and they're like, oh my gosh, where's the nearest Chase? I'm like, in Savannah, which is, that's a good situation. I had someone literally have to fly back to West Virginia once.
Wow. So how soon should they wire the money to you? Go ahead.
It's all what I was getting ready to say is another, if we're going to do more public service announcements.
Yes, do it.
If you don't need to wait until the exact cash to close number to wire, unless your budget is really, really, really tight.
Got it.
Any real estate firm cannot keep your excess funds. You will get them back,
Okay.
either in a check
Don't
or
worry
a wire at closing. So overwire and just get it back.
Yeah.
If you underwire, it's a huge problem because then you're scrambling day of closing and it might not close.
And you can't close.
And if you don't have a wire, and if you can't come to closing and you owe another $1,000, again, there's certain limits to what we can take, the good funds, and this what we are allowed to take as our escrow funds. Because again, all of this is monitored. Our escrow account, as an attorney's office, our IOLTA account, is monitored by the bar. If there is any kind of misuse of funds, if funds is negative, it automatically triggers the bar. The South Carolina bar immediately will come to that attorney and be like, why, where are these funds? What is going on?
Wow, I didn't know it was that tightly monitored.
Yeah, so we can't just be like, oh, it's fine, send it to us tomorrow. Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
doesn't work.
For example, this morning someone had to pay $500 more in closing because of a lender change. So $500, I was like, I can take a credit card for the $500, but I'm putting up my $500 of my attorney fee in there to make sure that it's not getting, our escrow account remains balanced and I'm not using any other client's funds.
Wow.
So I'm holding back $500 of my fee because it's below my fee to kind of cover for the client.
Yeah. Wow, I didn't know it's so intricate
So
on that.
overwire.
That's the
That's the
takeaway.
short version. Overwire.
Overwire. If you got the money, don't worry about it. And now, how soon would you get the money back to them? Do you have a certain?
Day of
At closing.
At closing.
As soon as the whole thing is ready to disperse,
It
that's
just gets
one
settled.
of the disbursements, like
I got it.
the payoff of the old loan.
Okay.
We had
Yeah.
someone again. Wow, this morning a lot happened. Someone sold their home in Brooklyn. It was like, oh, my people. They sold their home in Brooklyn and they had all of the money wired to us. You know, their home in Brooklyn was a very lucrative sale.
Yeah.
They just wired us all crazy amount of money and we applied it toward their purchase and they had over 100,000 left. So of course I immediately wired that back to them
Got
as
it.
soon as it's closed.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's
That way
handled that
there's-
day.
That way there's less wires going in and out instead of wiring us this amount and wiring from Brooklyn here. Like there's ways to figure it out also to help prevent wire fraud.
Okay. So I want to talk too about your escrow account because on the contract, there's a section that we have to say, hey, your earnest money deposit may go into an interest-bearing account. Are you okay with it? Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Because I have to explain that quite a bit. And I'm like, what are they doing with the interest? I always put I'm assuming you're earning interest. I don't know, but I just put it's okay if you do.
It's a special account. So she used the term IOLTA. It actually stands for what? Interest on lawyer trust account.
Okay.
And I believe all of the interest goes towards indigent legal fees. The South Carolina Bar, every state has its own, but I think
Okay.
they manage that interest and then it's applied to people who can't afford lawyers. I believe.
Oh, well, that's kind of cool. So it's not like you guys are keeping it and earning a bunch of interest. Okay.
Isn't yours, really? Because
Right. I mean, it's the law firm's account, but it's managed for it's client money.
yeah,
So therefore, yeah, it's kind of like that's why the bar supervises it and
Okay. That's very interesting. I never
earning
knew.
like 5% and
Well,
just cashing it.
Because, you get people like, well, that's my money. And I'm like, it's,
Some people have said that to me too, like, oh, I'm not going to wire 3 days before closing because I can make 3 days of interest. I'll wire the day of closing. And I'm like, dude, just forego the 25 cents.
that you're going to
You
earn.
can get your keys on the day of closing.
sometimes the Fed holds the funds, right?
Yeah.
Does
I mean,
does it get
it
forced
could
into
be
the
if there's a suspicious wire, a bank could hold it.
Mhm.
So particularly if it's an international wire, those take even longer. So,
True.
It's funny, we say wires can take from minutes to hours
yeah.
in your scope because sometimes
Or days if it's international.
Yeah.
or days.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And people don't understand too that for us, they want us to release the keys. It's like, well, it not only has to hit your account, but if it's a buyer side, it
It has to hit the seller's account.
has to hit the seller's account.
it's another thing, people are like, well, I'm not going to pick up the house and run away. And I'm like, yeah, but if you have access in that hour, if it burns down, then it's a whole other
If
issue.
your mover damaged something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Burn down's a dramatic one, but
Yeah. No,
yeah.
but anything could happen.
Sometimes I walk
Anything
out of the room and I have the keys with me and they're like, you don't trust me with the keys? And I'm like, love you. No. Sir, I've met for a whole 20 minutes. Like, where are my client?
So you're from Brooklyn.
And Polish.
So,
It's good. This is all really good. So you got anything else?
no, I don't know.
We've covered a lot.
We're done.
So do you guys
We haven't talked
go ahead? No, go for
your
it.
favorite topic.
Mine?
Let's talk about HOAs
Oh, I do love
in this
HOAs.
area.
Like HOAs. I'm the minority.
No, I'm serious. I love HOAs.
Yeah.
That was
Well,
good to see.
I grew up in an HOA community, like I mentioned.
Well,
I
being
like
here-
HOAs. I think
it's pretty.
But there's a lot of people that don't. I call it Anytown, USA, traditional neighborhoods. Most of them don't have an HOA. you know?
correct. Yeah.
So they come here and they, and then they see those ads, where it's some crazy neighbor going to the HOA complaint.
So the way I like to, the HOA is basically a set of rules that if you buy in that community, you're agreeing to follow those rules. You agree to pay the dues, you agree to follow the rules.
Yeah.
For better or worse, right? It's like some HOAs have better boards, some have worse boards, some rules you might not like, some rules you might like, but you don't get to pick and choose. It's like if you want to be a part of that community, you agree to follow the rules.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will say, "Oh, but they can't tell me what to do. I have rights." It's like you had a right to buy anywhere you wanted, but then when you bought in there, you waived some of those rights just like every other buyer did,
Right.
and you guys are agreeing to follow the common rules.
Right.
And if
You can see those rules before closing.
Absolutely.
They have access to all of those rules.
Via what? How do they find those rules? They are in the.
they're on the internet, you can ask the
Well, I'm
HOA.
just saying
You can ask. They're actually.
This actually happened in my community. Everyone on the Facebook page is arguing about the tree limbs and how to trim them. I pulled up the rules and covenants and restrictions from the Register of Deeds.
CCNRs.
Yep. Pulled them up and I posted on the Facebook page and I put the citation for the Register of Deeds in this book and page. You can view all of these rules in section 5.1. It is your responsibility to trim the trees. And I think not well received on the Facebook page.
Information. Not a great way to make friends and influence people.
Posted anonymously.
There you go.
But
She lives in the farm. Okay.
I do. We went out the farm. But I personally like HOAs because it keeps things in order. You don't have that neighbor parking on the front lawn or painting their house hot pink. It kind
The
of
way I like
keeps
to phrase it is,
community.
if you're the type of person who really likes to express your individuality with the exterior of your property, you're probably not going to like an HOA. If you're like, front door hot pink, flamingos everywhere, shipping container in your front yard,
Right.
murals, it's really not going to be right for you.
Mhm.
If you're the type of person who, on the other hand, wants your neighbors not to do that, you're probably going to like an HOA because it's going to prevent them from doing that.
Yep. And I think that's part of the charm of Hilton Head, why people love Hilton Head and Bluffton. It's so beautiful because the HOAs have these rules that everyone lives by.
I agree. And I was doing, like I said, I'm from here. I was doing a refinancing closing once a couple of years ago at someone's property, and they lived in Beaufort. And I was talking to the guy, and he said, "Well, where are you from?" And I was like, "I'm from Hilton Head." And he's like, "I hate Southern Beaufort County." It's a ranch. He's like, "All these HOAs, they're awful. They tell you what to do. No one can ever tell me what to do. I want to live my life the way I want." I was like, I get it. I get it. But I do have a question for you. And he goes, "Oh, what's up?" I said, "I noticed when I was driving into your driveway, your neighbor across the street has a shipping container in his front yard. Do you like that?" And he said, "No, I hate that thing. I wish I could get rid." And then he's like, "I see where this is going."
And it's all how you view it, right? I mean, everybody who pulls into these communities, they love how beautiful and manicured. Oh my God, this place is so beautiful. Well, why do you think it is? Because there's a uniform understanding of how things are done, and there's a process. I don't find them overbearing unless my dog's wandering around. I get a fine, then I get
We get them all the time.
They're fine places to live.
Or we can't have electric bikes, which I got to find. Yeah.
But if you do live in a community, you don't like the rules, you can always try to change the rules from within as well.
Right.
If you haven't bought in there yet, and you don't like the rules,
Stay out.
don't buy in that community.
Right.
I wish Brooklyn had HOAs. My neighbors were crazy.
Yeah.
There's pros and cons to it all.
Yeah,
I get in trouble. I was getting in trouble so much with our HOA, and I went down and asked if I could just prepay the
We
fines.
did. So we put it by
Did they appreciate that?
Yeah.
do it.
They said, just stop doing it. And I was like, well, I don't want to stop riding the bike. It was a little, what was that bike?
Electric.
It was a little razor bike. It was a little fast one. It was fun.
It's a little razor bike. I would zip around on the thing, a little car truck.
Yeah.
To have pedals, it's the bylaw
Okay.
say. So he was.
Would you do attach pedals?
I was gonna ask,
That's what I told him to do. I told him to weld pedals on.
Yeah.
yeah, so,
Well, pedals.
and I was like, all right, well, can I just prepay the fine? And she's like, no, you can't do that. And I was like, yeah, it's like, nice. But yeah, I don't have a problem, but a lot of people do. And to your point, the ARB, if you want to do something on the outside, and I don't find that, I tell everybody, if you're looking to improve your property, the ARB's not there as your enemy. They're actually going to say, yeah, great. We want the property values to stay high. We want it to look beautiful, So, but if you're looking to,
If your way of improving is building another 25 stories on your property,
Right.
they might say no.
Exactly right. Exactly right. It all depends on what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they're not there to work against you, And to your point, if you don't like it, then there's other places. Go to North Beauty. I call it the country of Hilton Head. I mean, like Ladies Island and, St. Helena, that's the country.
Northern Beaufort County.
Northern Beaufort County. That's right.
So we've had an awesome conversation
Yeah,
with you
it's been
guys.
good.
Just a couple more questions, and then we'll let you go home to your beautiful
Oh.
new baby.
New baby.
Your husband will be very excited to have you home.
For right now.
Yeah. Can you guys give me an example, or what would be some of the biggest mistakes you've seen people make in a real estate?
Or
Like in life, or
Jim, like all your experiences, you've gone a lot of things here, but just kind of what to somebody.
you can start firing away. You've
Yeah.
got to.
Yeah, so I just was saying earlier, I recently did a presentation on like do's and don'ts. So just off the top of my head, something that we've discussed was wires, right? Do's, always research those wires, research your bank limits. Also do's, research those HOA rules, make sure that you're comfortable with them.
Yeah.
Don't schedule your movers on the day of closing.
Right.
As much as we love our lenders and we love, working with them, sometimes things don't always go according to plan. There's changes. And sometimes, they're great changes like buying down a rate, but sometimes generating those documents, it's not just a copy and paste for the lender. It takes them some time. So it'll take a couple hours.
Yeah.
So don't
Or
schedule.
sometimes the sellers haven't actually left when they said they were going to leave. And it's
Or
like,
sometimes you get into the dominoes of contracts, like my sale's contingent on this purchase. Well, that purchase is contingent on someone else's sale. And somehow you have 4 parties all relying on each other's contracts to all close within 48 hours.
Yeah.
So that doesn't always happen. So do not schedule the movers on the day of, or even sometimes the next day. I would wait a little bit.
Yeah.
What other don'ts did we have? Don't make any major life changes, especially if you're using a lender, right?
Okay.
Don't quit your job as much as you
Yes,
hate it.
that's a
Stick
biggie.
it out. Don't start a business as much as you want to. Don't go and buy a bunch of furniture on credit or a car or a
but
boat.
Natalia, it says
Or-
no money down.
No sign. Yeah. Right. You're 6 months, same as
But
cash.
that is a loan,
Yeah.
which is what a lot of people don't realize. And
That's
the
right.
furniture sales guy is not saying this is a loan.
That's
It
right.
is a loan.
That's correct.
And it
Yeah.
goes against your debt to income ratio
Mhm.
Exactly.
qualification.
That's another don't. What other don'ts did we have?
Ugh.
Don't use your credit cards, buy new furniture, new appliances.
I had a weird one. Don't donate a bunch of money to charity the week of closing. The lender was asking where did this money come
Yeah.
from, why it
They
happened,
source it,
delayed
season it.
3-4 days.
Wow.
And I'm like, just be a good person after the closing.
Yeah.
Donate your money to charity after the
Yeah.
closing.
Yeah, from the time you submit that loan application, just make your life as the same as it possibly can be until it closes.
Okay.
Like, don't open new accounts. Don't transfer large sums of money from accounts you didn't tell the lender about.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
Yeah.
a big one. Right
anything that would basically cause a fraud or basically an alert where they'd say, "Hey, is this money laundering?"
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
you don't want to trigger that.
Do read your contract. Be familiar with it. And if it just sounds like a bunch of nothing to you, then speak to your real estate agent, speak to your attorney, let them clarify those things for you so there are no surprises with community enhancement fees or transfer fees.
Yeah.
What are some funny don't ones we had? We had a lot of funny ones.
I can't remember any more off the top of my head right now. You put me on the
We've
spot.
only had you here for like hours.
I know, right?
Um,
Don't worry, we'll send you an entire list. You wanted graphics to put up?
Yeah. We'll put it up as an overlay.
Yeah.
All right, I'd be remiss. Go ahead. Do you have something else?
One more thing. So we've talked about mistakes, right? What would be some advice, a piece of advice that you would leave with everybody?
Well, the
You
do
know.
I would say is enjoy the process. I mean, it is again at some point it's an ending a chapter and you're beginning a new chapter, whether it's an investment property, whether it's your forever home, whether it's your first home as a married couple. Enjoy it because it's such a it's not like most of us aren't buying houses every year.
Right.
I remember my closing day exactly. I remember that my husband and I went to dinner after to celebrate. I remember the cute video we did as soon as we got into the house with our keys. So just enjoy that process because it is stressful. But when you get those keys on that day, it's just the best feeling ever.
It really is.
That's what I actually love about real estate. That's my favorite thing.
Me too.
Giving them the key, giving them that basket, the thank you, and walking into that brand new house. It's an amazing feeling. So.
And enjoying, and enjoying the lifestyle they're about to live, here. Because you've been all around the world and you've definitely been around the world. But I feel like, there's a lot of unique places, but there's something about this place. And that's what I kind of want to end with because we are about lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
So just a couple things. What do you guys love about living here?
I love that if you're on a green light and you don't automatically start going, people aren't flipping you off. And that's a lifestyle thing. It's such a thing. I was the only person honking in Bluffton when I moved here. And now someone honks at me and I'm like, how dare you? That's a lifestyle thing. You give people grace.
Right.
And that doesn't exist in places where someone immediately lays on the horn on you.
Yeah.
Because you look down for a second.
Yeah,
so that's a lifestyle thing, I think.
Yeah.
What about you?
I can't beat mine.
I can't beat yours. One of my favorite things is probably just the salt marsh. Like I love the marsh, and Beaufort County has more salt marsh than any other county in the country, or it's close. If not, it's just like a huge chunk of this unique geography is only right here, really.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because I grew up with it, but anytime I'd come home and visit, I'd be like, why don't I live here?
Mm-hmm.
And then so I moved back.
It's so funny because what triggered us to move here was we were down in Sea Pines on Baynard Cove.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never stayed on the marsh, so we always were oceanfront, all that. So I never really, and then we would sit out at night and, it sits right out there on Baynard Cove, sunsets, and you see the tide coming in and out. You see, just the whole ecosystem and
the lives that live in the marsh.
I mean, we were fishing, we were crabbing, we kayaked, and we were going off, and I fell in the smell, it's so unique. And I was
Some
like,
people love it. Some people don't.
Shiloh, we were driving somewhere. Shiloh's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "That's the marsh." It's so good, But I agree with you. I think there's something about it that
I like the ocean, but I love the marsh.
I agree with you.
All right, you beat my green light thing.
Yeah, I feel like it's not about these, because we love to remind people and to inspire people. Like that's this area. There's something about and I do. I don't know what it is, but there is something here that is life-giving,
Definitely.
And that's why you moved back. You moved here.
Yeah.
We moved here. With lifestyle that.
All right, last question. Go-to restaurant. What's your go-to restaurant for somebody who's in town?
So hard.
Oh.
Cottage, downtown Bluffton.
Okay.
What is it? What kind of food?
Just kind of local food. So they have shrimp and grits that are great. They have fish tacos based on whatever fish they're having then.
Okay. Fresh fish coming out of the ocean? Ocean?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of my favorite thing there too. Besides the shrimp and grits, they're like award winning.
You get a
good idea of Bluffton because it's downtown Bluffton on Calhoun. It's literally a shack.
Yeah.
It's a cottage. It's a cottage home. And it's really cozy and the food's
haven't been there.
Oh no,
we have to go. Okay.
What?
I know we haven't been there. We don't leave the island. It's like might as well go to Europe. I mean, it's
oh
like
my god.
Right. Yeah, like it says Hilton Head's podcast. Do you want me to give you Hilton Head restaurant
or yours? But what would be your go-to if you said, "Hey, Hannah, let's go"?
We can only go to one dinner and we're going somewhere.
Yeah.
Farm in Bluffton.
I love the farm.
Still dinner there.
Farm's awesome.
I do love the farm.
And farm, to answer the question, farm to table cuisine is not Like the atmosphere is not pretentious at all.
Yeah.
The food, on the other hand, is like just as good as you'll get in, I don't know, Manhattan or Charleston or anywhere else.
Wow.
So I remember the year before we moved back here, we had dinner at Farm when we were visiting my parents, and the best meal we had the entire year when we lived in Manhattan was at Farm in Bluffton.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
We should know now. We will leave the island for that. Yeah.
Cool.
And we like olive and fig too, though. We'll leave the island for that.
yes, I like it a lot too.
Yeah.
But that's got a Hilton Head address. I mean, it's like Moss Creek.
Yeah, that's
So-
right. Yeah. So awesome. Well, we really appreciate having you guys. We're going to put all your contact information in the link below of the video, and we'll also put your overlay here so everybody can reach out to you. And, we hope that if anybody out there has any questions or needs a good real estate attorney or estate planner, make sure you contact Tom and Natalia at Butler College.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for
Thank you.
having us.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.